Hey, good evening, everybody. Before we get started, just a reminder, we're starting a new series tonight, and we're going to be doing a series called Faces of Addiction. So we'll be working on that. I'll do codependency tonight to be the foundation of it. I want to start off by doing a reading from The Language of Letting Go, the daily meditation book for codependency. And today's reading, Recovery. How easy it is to blame our problems on others. Often our accusations are justified. We probably are feeling hurt and frustrated. In those moments, we begin to believe that the solution to our pain and frustration is getting the other person to do whatever we want them to do, or having the outcome be we desire. But these self-defeating illusions put the power and control of our life in other people's hands. We call that codependency. The solution to our pain and frustration, however valid, is to acknowledge our feelings. We feel the anger, the grief, then we let go of the feelings and find peace. We know our happiness isn't controlled by another human being, even though we may have convinced ourselves it is. We call this acceptance. Then we decide that although we like our situation to be different, maybe our life is happening this way for a reason. Maybe there is a higher purpose and plan in play, one that's better than we could have orchestrated. We call this faith. Then we decide what we need to do, what is within our power to do to take care of ourselves. That's called recovery. It's easy to point a finger at another, but it's more rewarding to gently point it at ourselves. Today I will live with my pain and frustration by dealing with my personal feelings. I wanted to share that tonight because I want to kind of kick off the series on the faces of addiction by talking about the concept of codependency. For those of you who have been here before, I want to redefine what codependency is. The simple definition of it is any person, place, or thing that I have become so dependent on that it creates unmanageability or insanity in my life. That could be a substance. That could be a relationship. That could be a family member. That could be a job. It could be a lot of things. The bottom line is, it literally is creating problems in my life. And as a result, then, I have a tendency to go back to it and go back to it over and over and over again. I become codependent on it. I can't function without it. When we talk about codependency, we talk about it being the root and the foundation of all addiction. Because addiction basically is the cover. You know, about a month ago, we talked about something called the iceberg theory. And we talked about the fact that so many of us, because we're frozen on the inside, use addiction as a cover to avoid and run away from dealing with the reality and the feelings and the things going on inside of us. And as a result, then we did a lot of blaming of others, and basically always looking at what somebody else did, because many times, I know in my own case especially, too scared to look at what I did, to look within my own heart and to do my own inventory. I've said it before that codependence, we have this uncanny way of doing everybody else's inventory. When it comes to ours, we kind of put that in the back burner for a while. We'll get to it later. So the bottom line is, what I want to do tonight is do an overview of the connection between codependency and addiction. To do that, I want to kind of remind everybody that the foundations of codependency are developed in us probably within the first 10 years of our life. Traits, characteristics, we pick them up. And we pick them up from not just from our blood family, but also from the other family systems we're part of as we're children growing up. Our blood family, and in many ways the step family, but also a neighborhood, a cultural and environment family. They have a good influence on us. Our religious family systems, also our peer family, and above all, our society family. It's amazing sometimes when you look at this, because the first 10 years of my life were from 1940 to 1950. The first 10 years of my granddaughter's life were from 1998 to 2008. I think we got different messages, especially when it comes to social media and stuff to that effect. And so today, especially, we pick up a lot of our patterns, our frustrations, all kinds of things from areas of social media and society. We then also experience the fact that many of us have experienced some forms of dysfunctionality in our family system. I learned a long time ago that every family system has some kind of dysfunctionality. Why? Because they're all human beings. At least I checked. If maybe you were born to a robot, I don't know. But the bottom line is we basically have dysfunctional family systems, one way or another. There's no such thing as a perfect family. Somebody tells me they grew up in a perfect family, I want to take them somewhere and straighten them out. But I can't do that. But it's all part of it. The problem, there is no perfect. As a result, then many of us have picked up different traits and characteristics from our family system. Just as an example, my mother was the addict in my family. I picked up a lot of my addictive personality from my mom. She's also a compulsive overeater. I picked my eating disorder up from my mom. My mom basically gave me those patterns. My father was Mr. Co-Dependency, Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Fantastic, who did everything for everybody, but never did a thing for himself his whole entire life. He was always giving. I was never taught how to receive. So I picked up patterns. The neighborhood was the exact same way, back then. And basically my religious system taught me guilt and fear, and I can go on and on and on. The bottom line is, these are my patterns, they're my traits, they're things I grew up with, and later on I had to deal with them. And so basically what happens many times, because so many of us have experienced different forms of dysfunctionality, as adults, we pick up what I call survivor skills. And as you know, I put them in 3 categories. We either isolate, avoid, or hide, or we go into a fantasy world or a make-believe world, because I can't face the real world, or we get into the caretaking world, which means I love taking care of somebody else. It helps me avoid looking at me. These are patterns we pick up in the concept of it. When it comes to isolation, it's normally people that grew up in homes that are empty, that are cold. They're basically people that never got a lot of love, a lot of intimacy. So as adults, they're empty, they're lonely. They basically are searching for something to belong to, some kind of a family to belong to. So many times they'll migrate towards drugs and alcohol because they can lose themselves in that and they can become somebody else. It takes away the loneliness. Many, many people have found their result of loneliness in a bottle. And the bottle doesn't work. It's not a very good relationship. They can also find it in pills, any way to avoid, to run away, to hide. They also, isolators have a tendency, because they're empty and they're lonely, to migrate towards relationships. Yeah, you heard me say this before. There's kind of a mantra. It goes like this. If you truly love someone, let them go. If they're supposed to come back, they'll come back. We don't believe that. Codependents believe if you truly love someone, follow them and stalk them. If they try to get away, kill them. Little control issues there. The bottom line is we have a tendency very many times when it comes to relationships, and become a very powerful addiction, because when I'm empty and I'm lonely, I have a tendency to take people hostage. I want them to be everything for me. I'll get into that in a lot of detail when I get into the faces of addiction, and I go into all the isolation addictions next week. But the bottom line is we can very easily make any relationship a form of an addiction. Because again, I want you to be everything to me. I always talk about a song back in the 50s. It's a very romantic song. It's kind of nice. And I'm not going to sing. Relax. Don't get nervous. But the bottom line is, it goes like this. You are my everything. You are my all. Without you, I am nothing. That sounds very nice, doesn't it? It's very sick. It's crazy. It's insane. It means you don't exist. You are everything to me. So the concept is we basically get caught up in this. The other addiction that comes under it is workaholism. I can hide in my work. God, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. Ask me who I am, I tell you what I do. Because I really don't know who I really am on the inside. So I have a tendency to make my job become my identity. And as a result, I get caught up in it. Again, it's a great place to hide. And also, I also realize the fact that many people get used to what I call ritual, doing the same thing every day till 10 years after they're dead. They just function, they go through it, they wake up, they go to sleep, they function, they get through it. Look at my poor mom, who worked for 35 years in Camel Soup and worked on a can line. And literally, she had to sit in a can line every day for 8 hours, taking dented cans off of the can line as they went by. Can you imagine doing that for 8 hours every day? As a result, everybody on a can line popped no-dose pills, amphetamines. My mom became very addicted to amphetamines. They became a normal to her to keep her awake. So as a result, then, she migrated towards different things in that direction. But it's just interesting how these patterns develop inside of you. And so work can be a place. That's your identity. That's what I do. Another area of addiction that goes along with isolation is anorexia. We don't talk too much about anorexia. But really, in reality, 80% of all anorexics are usually females, and they usually are people that have major issues with their fathers. And as a result, then, they have a tendency to kind of starve themselves, make themselves become necessary. They actually shut down many of their body functions. And as a result, then, they literally want somebody to take care of them. See, I don't want to grow up. I want you to pay attention to me. I want you to love me. I want you to take care of me. And so a good way of doing that is to get sick. Then people pay attention to you. So it's a pattern we develop in our life. Loneliness can be so powerful. I'll really get into this a lot next week when we do isolation addictions. But the bottom line is isolation and loneliness and things of that effect can really cause us to do some very strange and very crazy things. The second area is called fantasy. These are normally kids that have tons and tons and tons of secrets. These are the kids that have been incested, sexually abused, come out of homes where there's a lot of insanity, a lot of craziness. These are the kids that basically at a very early age are embarrassed by their families, don't want to talk about them. So at an early age, they learn how to make up stories and create stories. And the crazy thing about creating stories, if you tell them long enough, you actually start to believe them. And as a result, then that becomes your normal. And so it's really scary a lot of times because when it comes to adulthood, they're scared to death deep down inside that somebody's going to find out all this stuff that's going on inside of me. So what do? I go to the fantasy world, the make-believe world. It's a place to hide in. We see this in drugs and alcohol. We see it in sexual addiction. We see it in power addictions. We see it in compulsive shoplifting, compulsive shopping. We see it in narcissism, in all different ways and areas in which people live in this fantasy world. And to them, it's not really fantasy. They truly do believe it. And as a result, then what do? They go to the fantasy world because they want to avoid reality. When it comes to drugs and alcohol, many drug addicts and many alcoholics, if you confront them, they'll say, not me, it must be somebody else. Again, shame and guilt. It's almost like they do something called disassociation. They literally associate to another person. And then it's easy to blame somebody. I drink because of you. You're my problem. Everything comes back to the inside. As a result, then I avoid what's really going on inside of me. You hear this in the program all the time. We're as sick as our secrets. And so the bottom line is, even when it comes to sexual addiction, I can have a relationship with somebody on a chat room, on the internet, stuff to that effect. It avoids me having to actually deal with human beings on a human level. I can do a lot of crazy things that get the rush and the high from it. I can also get into a lot of concepts of power addictions where enough is never enough. When it comes to relationships, I don't know how to have relationships. Look at my normal. There's chaos and confusion. So what do? I like to have fantasy relationships. So it's that concept, if I can't have you, I want you. But if you're available, get lost. See, I don't want all that stuff about, have to actually commit to something. Wow, excuse me for cursing. But the bottom line is, I got to make a commitment. I got to take the garbage out. I got to do things. I'd rather live in my fantasy world. And it's scary, especially with narcissism, because I can literally believe things that really aren't real. And we see this in power addictions a lot of times. It's like I really go to a make-believe world to avoid reality. The third area is caretaking. And if you want me to, I can stay till midnight and talk about this one. God, it's me. But the bottom line is, caretakers are normally goody two-shoes kids that go from 3 to 30. These are the kids that are given a lot of responsibility at an early age, tremendous amount of expectations on them, wanting them to be something, perform, make sure you always get A's, make sure you're always on target, everything else in that direction. It becomes very normal. So when it comes to survivor skills, basically, they've learned. See, here's the thing. Most caretakers are very, very, very angry people on the inside. Their childhood has been taken away from them. Never really had a childhood. I mean, I was expected to be Mr. Goody two-shoes. My mother and my family was thrilled. They wanted me to become the family priest when I was 14 years old. I lived out everybody's dream but mine. Of course, I didn't have any. Couldn't live one out. Because literally everyone else was telling me who I am and what I'm doing. So as a result, very many times as an adult, what do? I become a performer. I literally migrate towards workaholism. And workaholism is a great way for a caretaker. Normally it's teachers, nurses, therapists, people in the helping profession, because we have a tendency to want to be in charge of everything, run everything. But above all, we do a lot of griping, complaining about our job, about people. But guess what? We're always there. We're always on time. We get everything done. And whatever you do, don't pay us too much. We get upset at that. What can I tell you? We never know our worth. So I'm telling my life story now. But the bottom line is, it's all this crazy stuff that we do in the course of our journey. And as a result, then we literally have a tendency to migrate towards drugs and alcohol. But these are the secret addicts. Everything's done behind closed doors. It's totally secret. And as a result, no one knows on the outside we perform, we're functional. People will never see what's really going on. The years I was in the priesthood, the 20 years, actually 18 of them, the last 2 I was in recovery. But the first 18 years of my priesthood, I was literally a shell. I functioned. Believe me, I got a lot done. I just about saved the world. It was fantastic. But there was no me. And what that did, eventually, what it did to me was, it put me in a hospital with a nervous breakdown. I overextended myself. It put me in debt, in deep debt, from paying people's bills for them, doing everything for them. Totally amazing. And as a result, then, in the hospital, I was told that I was spiritually dead. I was an empty shell on the inside. And we learn what spirituality really is. It's coming to a knowledge of your personal self, to build a personal relationship with yourself as a person. And so as a result, very many times, secret addicts, we basically, we don't do stuff in public. We do everything behind the doors, secretly. All kinds of secrets. It's totally amazing. And I carried tons of them for a long time. I thank God today for the gift of recovery, being able to work through it. The other addiction that goes along with this, besides workaholism, and relationships. Caretakers love to get involved in relationships with sickies. The sicker, the better. Bring me your sick and you're deprived, and I will take care of them. I get caught up in this because it's a control issue, is what it comes down to. It's almost like me in control, you're not. But here's the rule, always the damn rules caretakers have. Don't you dare get better. So I'm going to bitch about you, gripe about you, complain about you all day long. You actually start to get better, you scare me. See, I'm losing control. This whole thing is centralized around control and fear, anxiety, worry, constantly trying to make sure things are the way you want them to be. Afraid of making a mistake. I got to be in charge. I got to run everything. It's scary. And I realized this in my first years being with Starting Point. This coming Tuesday, Starting Point will be 46 years old. In my first years with Starting Point, I was a one-man show. Very little staff. We did everything. As a result, for everything from, therapy down to janitorism, a little bit of everything, not a problem. Because again, I was stuck in that world of external, that world of holding on the inside. The other addiction that goes along with this is compulsive overeating. Compulsive overeaters fundamentally are very, very, very angry people. The only problem is we are always smiling on the outside. Inside, we have a negative image of ourselves. We literally can use food as a way to avoid intimacy, to avoid relationships, to avoid getting close to anyone. It's a great hiding place, by the way. It was for me, I know that. So as a result of it, I realized where my eating disorder came from. So I've learned my relationship with food. My mother taught me beautifully. Whenever I got upset, she'd say to me, go eat, you'll feel better. Well, guess what? She was right. Comfort food, living that way, the concept of it. Our whole family was centralized around comfort food and wine, the two things. The whole neighborhood was. You had to fit into the pattern. And so the concept was, I never realized this, but a lot of me, I carried a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of negative feelings. And I thank God through the 12 steps and through the program of recovery, I was able finally to get in touch with the crazy iceberg inside of me and begin the thawing out process. And it's still going on today. As you begin to realize that learning about yourself is a process we have to go through. I look at these addictions and these things in this direction, and I realize every one of them is a hiding place. It's to avoid, to run away from, having to look within your own self. We see this also a lot of times in the area of bulimia, anorexia, compulsive overeating when it comes to eating disorders. We literally have a tendency to have bad body images, see ourselves the way we're not. I still have a very negative body image of myself. My wife will joke with me because I have what I call my fat days. I look in the mirror and I see an obese person in the mirror. Everybody else tells me I'm not. But again, it's almost like a dry drunk in a lot of ways. It's just totally amazing. Image, stuff to this effect. It's all part of it. It's all connected with it. And as a result, then we have a tendency very many times to migrate towards these, to run away from a real sense of ourself as a person. I've said this so many times in the course of my talks on relationships and my series on codependency. The ultimate relationship that we have in life is the one that we have with ourselves, is the ultimate of all relationships. And it's a relationship we have to work on every day. Because I really can't share anything with anybody else unless it comes from my own stuff, my own spiritual awakening, unless it comes from the core of my heart, my center. Because so many times we have a tendency, very many times, again, even to this day, sometimes there's some things I just don't want to deal with. I don't want to face. I don't want to handle them. Making decisions a lot of times with codependency, especially when it comes to forms of addiction. I have to finally make changes in my life. I've often said over and over again that change is a curse word for codependence. It's scary to make changes, to grow, to become responsible, open up new doors and new directions in life. It's all scary stuff. And yet it's beautiful at the same time. And yet there's a beautiful reading we have in my eating disorder program. And it says, recovery is hard work. There is no magic. And that real recovery takes time, takes effort. It's stuff we have to work on constantly. Otherwise, we fall back into old traps and old behaviors in all the areas of life. One of the greatest adventures in the world, and I love it, is to be able to continue that process of working on yourself. I always tell people we have to work on ourselves until about 10 years after we're dead. But if you're a real card-carrying codependent, 50 years after you're dead, still got a lot more work to do, what can I tell you? But it's all about adventure, discovering, opening up doors, seeing new things in life. So when I talk about addiction, I'm talking about an addictive personality. Now, I can have an addictive personality. I can make anything into an addiction if I'm not careful. I can make even, the simplest little thing. You can make your pets into an addiction. You can make a lot of things into an addiction. One lady told me she went bankrupt because she was raising 8 dogs at her house. And literally, she spent a fortune on those animals. They became like her children. Her whole life was centralized around them. We can very easily make them all kinds of things and turn it into another area. That's why we have to learn the difference between codependency and interdependency. We have a sense of interdependency in the course of our journey in life. And right now, I'm very interdependent on the internet. I'm interdependent on the electrical system, on the lights in my house. That's all normal stuff. But the question is, if these things came or had a breakdown, would I still be able to function? Would my life still be okay? That's really important. And so in life, we have to realize the fact that this pattern of codependency is something that leads us into addiction, because literally I look for something either to isolate, to hide, to run away, to go into a fantasy world. So what I want to try to do in this series is spend the whole session just on isolation addictions, to go into a lot of detail and to look at the recovery process and dealing with them, and then spend a whole session on fantasy addictions and on caretaking, and realize the fact that I'm grateful today in a lot of ways that there are, like from last time I checked, there are 21 different 12-step programs. And they're all connected around the same thing. They're all connected about the process of recovery, about the 12 steps, about what the founding fathers actually put together. And so from that beautiful, beautiful concept of AA came all these beautiful programs. And I wonder sometimes if the early founders really knew what was going to happen. Now, they were dealing with what they had to deal with, but I know there had to be some kind of divine intervention there to help them through this process, to keep things going. And I really believe in the course of our journey in life, we experience many, many different forms of divine intervention. Because I really believe that every one of us, each one of us is a miracle. And so I have to learn to arrest my addictions, but to arrest them is scary. I give an example. Addicts will tell you this. I've worked with people going through rehabs, and they think that just because I stop using, that now I'm in fantasy land. No, you're not. The work only begins then. Once you put the addiction down, then the work begins. That's why there is no magic. We really have to, and again, it's a beautiful investment. I've learned in the course of my journey in life, I don't want to stop learning. I don't want to stop growing. You know, at my age of 83, I'm still going through therapy every 2 weeks. I'm still working with a therapist. I still work with a nutritionist. I work with different things in the course of my life because I need help. I need direction. I need people to guide me and work with me. I don't want to do it by myself. That's very lonely and very sad. We need each other. We're family. We're connected to one another. We learn from each other. We grow from each other. The greatest teachers I've ever had in my life are other people in recovery, other people I've met in the course of my journey. I realized that it's interesting because when I was studying for my degree in pastoral counseling at LaSalle University, the books were great, the information was great, the techniques they taught me were great. I learned nothing about life until I began something called experiences. You learn from experience. You learn from those who have gone before you. You learn from those who have paid the price. You learn from those that really have got hurt through this whole process. If I can share my experience, my hope, my strength, my hope, even my pain, my struggle, stuff to that effect, it means I'm able to share that and be open with it. Because I don't want to live in a quiet, secret world anymore. I don't like that world. You know why? It's a world where you always have to worry that people are going to find out who you are. They're going to find out the real you. Not a lot of fun to live in that world. And that's why it's so important. Take it easy. Don't be so hard on yourself. Take a break and just go on a journey. Learn something. I told you this story before. My sponsor, one of the greatest sponsors I had, and I have plenty of great sponsors, still do today, used to say to me, Richard, he used to say, if you learn that much today, you made progress. That's enough. I used to joke with him. I used to go like this, about if I learned that much. He said, no, that's enough. Little bit at a time. Discovery, finding things out, connecting. People that have been in recovery for a long time will tell you it wasn't magic. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process of learning. And what the powerful part about it is, why do you want to be done? If you're done, it means you're dead. I don't want to be done. I want to keep learning, keep growing, keep discovering. It's always something new to discover and learn. So tonight, I just wanted to do an overview of the different areas, how codependency is the root, is the foundation of all addictions. And sooner or later, if you put down that addiction, otherwise, you know what happens? A lot of addicts have a tendency to do something called rebounding. That means I go from one addiction to another addiction. I put one down, pick up another one. Or I go from relationship to relationship because I'm scared to stand still and look at me on the inside. And that's why one of the things that's hard to do is basically to break patterns, to go new directions and new ways in life, but it's possible. So my prayer tonight, I want to pray that we have the strength, that we have the courage, we have the openness to be able to take the journey from addiction into recovery, the journey of rediscovering and finding out things about ourselves, opening up new doors. It's like an adventure. I love that phrase in recovery. They say our goal is to be joyous, happy, and free. I love that phrase. I really do. To be joyous, happy, and free. To live, to celebrate, to enjoy life. Life is to be celebrated. We need each other. We need one another. That's why I always say my recovery family is one of the most powerful families in my life, because it's a family of hurting, it's a family of joy, it's a family of celebration. So let us pray and keep that in mind. Let us pray. God, we come before you in prayer. We ask the God of our understanding, our divine presence, whatever we as understand our connection with God to be. We ask every day for help. We ask for guidance. We ask for direction. We ask that you help us and work with us to help us on this journey called life. Teach us to be open, to learn, to grow, to experience new things. Teach us to be open towards change, towards development. Give us the strength and the courage to walk the journey. Help us to learn from our mistakes. Teach us that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have to learn and grow from things that we do in the course of our journey in life. But above all, teach us how beautiful we are and how special we are. Teach us our uniqueness, our specialness as human beings. Each one of us is one of your creations. Each one of us is special. Each one of us is on a journey. Yes, we get sidelined sometimes with this thing called addiction. Sometimes we get into craziness. We have to go through sometimes the struggle to get to the other side. It sounds like we have to work hard and earn and work through things in the course of our life. So thank you. Thank you for the teachers, the messengers you send into our life. Help us to become more open. Help us to grow closer to you and to realize with your help and guidance, everything is possible. We pray and we ask this in your name. Amen.